Hello. All right, I'm nervous, so give me some love. Hello. Yes, flooded the room with love. Perfect. My name is Hranitzkys, and I welcome you to the wonderful afternoon. Thank God it's spring. Yeah, welcome at FMX. I think it's my third time presenting here at FMX, and I'm super honored and flattered and very, very happy. And yes, I'm a little bit nervous because although I've been presenting for about 15 years, there was one time I wasn't nervous and I totally screwed up. So I kind of learned that being nervous helps you focus and drive your attention to what you're going to talk about. So before we get started, I would like to run you my showreel, which my friend Michael just finished editing yesterday, literally. Some of the work that you see here has been done with friends and colleagues. Some of it I did alone. But it gives you a little impression of what I've been up to in the last couple of years. So I'd like to run that for you. Yeah. Thank you. And also a big shout out to everyone watching online, because apparently it's going to be streamed. So I know some of my friends and family are watching. So hello also for those who are not attending. So what I'm going to talk about, motion graphics, mainly made with Cinema 4D and After Effects. So these are the two tools that I use the most and have the most fun with working with it. So just to give an impression, who's using After Effects here? Just show me your hands. Okay, it's great. Who's not using it? So why? Okay, let's meet up later on, okay? So who's using Cinema 4D? Okay, fantastic. Who's not using it? Okay, so what's the rest doing? Well, they're programming, good. So this talk is going to be featuring on three projects I would like to break down. Hopefully everyone will get some inspiration, some motivation, maybe learn some technical things. We also go into the applications to show you a few things, a little breakdown actually live in After Effects as well as Cinema 4D. And it's becoming more and more difficult to work as a freelancer. So who's a design or animation student or still studying? Okay, quite a lot. I think it's overwhelming because there's so many big studios and big companies doing great work, and me as a freelancer who occasionally gets hired by studios to work on location or from my own studio, but sometimes also work directly with clients. is very challenging to compete. Well, not compete, but you have the big houses then, and you kind of have to work somehow to make things happen. And I think having a broad knowledge of these tools that I'm going to show you allows for a certain creative freedom, because at the end it doesn't really matter with what tool you do things, but the result is what matters. So I found this funny picture here. It's called the isolator. It's been invented 1925, I think. So it allows you to focus on things. So 1925, I think things weren't easier. I mean, certainly there was no Facebook or something which could distract you, but I found it very interesting when I was looking for inspiration and how to focus on things. But if you're working with clients and supervisors, sometimes things feel like this. I don't know if you've seen this. We all do very important things in CG, and then you nudge it over a little bit, and you nudge it over to that side, and then your supervisor comes and say, nope, back to the other side. And have you ever felt like this before? Yeah, maybe. I think this is true in some things where you just go like, okay, yeah, whatever. It doesn't really matter where it is, because at the end, all matters is the result. So what I'm going to talk about precisely, it's going to be 3 projects. I call them glossy and shiny logos, because we're going to animate glossy and shiny logos. That's one of the terms you hear so many times by clients, like, I have this logo, make it look like high quality, make it look, valuable, make it look like something it's really a valuable brand, and how to achieve certain effects to pull this off. Then we're going to have a second project. It's called it's the Exquisite corpse. I'm going to explain what that is. Who doesn't know what that is? Who doesn't know what Exquisite corpse is? Okay, I didn't know it until 2 years ago. So it's going to be interesting. And then the third one and the last one is going to be fun with bubbles, where I'm going to show you how I animated a few bubbles in Cinema 4D to pull up that MediaMarkt logo animation. So let's get started with glossy and shiny logos. That project was done, I think, last year or the year before by a German company, Werbeweischer and Jost von Brandis. So what do they do? Well, they sell commercials for movie theaters mainly. So that's what they do. So they kind of are in between the agencies and the studios and the cinema theater, so where you can spot and place your ads. And the challenge was that they want to have 2 logo animations for 2 brands, but they kind of belong to the same house, so it had to look different, but same at the same time. So it was kind of difficult. It needed to match somehow, and the challenge is because they're obviously very different. So the first one is called Werbeweischer, it's for cinema advertising, and the other one is called Jost von Brandis, and it's for auto advertising. So it's the same font, but it's a different color, different amount of letters, etc. So the good thing was I had complete creative freedom. They said, yeah, well, we trust you, you do whatever you want, you do what you can do best, and then you should be fine. Am I blocking the view to someone because I see my head? Everyone is fine, also in the back? Yeah? I don't like to hide behind my laptop, so that's why I'm standing. So let's focus on the first one, cinema advertising, Werbeweischer. We have a project, I sit down first, obviously, and do a brainstorm. If it's for the client directly, if there's no agency in between that says, all right, here's a finished storyboard, here's a finished script, here are style frames, just animate it. This can be also very rewarding just to do that, because sometimes you just want to just work and without spending too much time coming up with different concepts. So sometimes it's a love and hate relationship. But for this project, I was pretty energized and thought, okay, yeah, what can we do? So I was brainstorming, okay, what is cinema? Cinema is lights, is glamour, is red. Obviously, the logo is red, so that helped. It's warm. You're sitting in a warm, comfortable environment watching a movie. Obviously, depth of field and the bokeh effect that comes with it is also a big part of cinema or cinematography. So these were the things that I wanted to convey in the logo animation. It should be really short. I think 5 seconds was the goal. And then I came up with this one. So basically, you see a lot of like lens flares. I know it's kind of like the shine of 2013 or 2016 or whatever, where in the past shine was used, and now it's with the lens flares. But if you use it subtly, I think it can really help give you the impression of light. So a lot of background animation going on in the background, some bokeh effects that are just swirling around, giving impression of light, and a tint of blue on the corner left. just to direct kind of towards the other brand. So for the other logo animation, it will be a blue background with a little bit of red. So you see a little bit of a connection for both brands, and I'm just going to run that to you really quickly. So this is the final clip. Added a little bit of flickering, and this is something that that had to be pulled off. I think I had a budget of 3 days or something to come up with this from start to finish. But then, of course, there was the other one, which was the auto advertising company, Joost van Brandes. So they do what is auto advertising? They do like posters, like in a bus station, where behind the glass wall, or the what's it called, Litfaßsäule? What's the English word for that? Never use it in English. You know, like the cylinders that are on the street outside, where things are glued on. I don't know what they're called, but yeah, auto advertising. So what kind of words come in your mind if you hear that? Well, glass, obviously, it's behind glass. Glossy, it's cold, mostly outside. So blue, the natural color. So these were the things that I thought. So okay, how can I do an animation that is very similar but yet different to the first one? So I had the idea of using like glass shapes that make up the logo. So something is spinning, you have reflections, you have this glossy, tactile feel to it. So it looks almost like it's filmed, but it's actually not. So it's CG. So the idea was born to use those little rectangular shapes that are moving around in 3D space, and then just camera dollies back, and then at the end the logo is revealed. So that's basically how it looks at the end. And for this, it was a bit more complicated than the first one, because for this one I had to obviously do it in 3D. The other one was just 2D in After Effects, but for this one I wanted to go back to making these things look realistic as possible. So I decided to go with Cinema 4D to create these little shapes, and I'm going to show you how this was done in a minute. A lot of people ask me, what do you do for rendering? What kind of software do you use? Well, my knowledge of Cinema 4D is, I would say, probably average, to be honest. And I think many of you in the room here are way more sophisticated in Cinema 4D than I am. I can go until here maybe in Cinema 4D, but then with the combined knowledge of After Effects, I can go here. So that helps a lot. So thankfully I have a lot of help as well from friends I'm sharing the studio environment with, namely like Akira, Daniel, Max, and these guys. So whenever I run into something like, I don't know how to do this, I have this in mind, but how can I do this? Then they are glad to help, and they do the same if they run into issues with After Effects. So I think it's no shame to say, okay, I have my limits, I can go until here, but then I don't know how to proceed. I'll ask someone who is smarter than you, and that's, I think, being honest to yourself and to your client. You don't have to tell your client that you don't know how to do that, but obviously you have to know the people who you can ask to pull it off. So yeah, a lot of this is done with just simple advanced render and physical render, standard Cinema 4D. Some of the things that we did that were a bit more complicated, a bit more sophisticated, is done with Arnold, C4D to Arnold. And we render mostly locally on all the computers that are in the studio. So multiple machines used up on a team render network, or if it's something that's really heavy that would take weeks or months, even with our few computers, we render it also online. And for local render, we use the setup from Cut Network. These guys are also here. They have those really affordable little cubes, the render cubes they're called, and it's really simple to set up. So you plug them in, and Team Render can find them individually and can say how many render nodes do you want to commit for your render. So that's a really good and affordable way. You can fit it into one of those specially designed server furniture things here. It's made by a Swedish design company. I'm not sure what the name was, but you can get them really cheap, and it fits perfectly and doesn't look so shabby. So that's the setup. So yeah, so let's dive in, and I'll show you a few things. So feel free to save up any questions for the end. I'll hopefully have some time left at the end for some Q&A. So let's fire up C4D and go for this one. And I'm just quickly going to walk you through the setup here and what I'm watching out for. And some of you might have a few questions right away, especially with the new workflow being possible with Cinewear. So this is the setup. There's just a spline where all those shapes are flying around, and if I play that back in this window, you can see what happens there. And like I said, for my knowledge, it was like, okay, I knew what I wanted. I had problems setting this up, so Akira helped me with the setup here, with the MoGraph setup to come up with this effect. But I definitely knew which look I wanted, and I wanted to have something like displaced and something that looks like glassy. And obviously, the secret to that is always using if you go to the transparency, you use the reflection, the refraction values, depending on what you want to achieve. If you do 1.1, for example, then you have less refraction. So if you render that, things look differently. And if you crank it up to something pretty high, I think glass has 1.2. I think that's, if I'm not mistaken, there's like a chart that you can look up. So it gives you all these nice little effects. And yes, this doesn't look too sexy if it's coming out of Cinema 4D, because I said, yeah, I don't care. I want to take it to After Effects to further pimp it and make it look really, really nice. And the most important thing for this one was using multipass renders. I always do everything in multipasses because, well, why? Because I can always go back and change things without hopefully not having to re-render it if the animation doesn't change. Multipass is basically a super big time saver and also something that allows you to be more creative. And especially with the new Cinewear workflow. Who has tested Cinewear? Who of you? So few, wow, okay, it's been out for like 3 years. Okay, so who doesn't know what Cinewear is? Like, absolutely not, okay? I'll quickly explain it. Cinewear is a new workflow that allows After Effects to load in C4D files natively. So you can actually take a file, import it into After Effects, and you can see all the 3D objects and geometry in After Effects, and you can actually render in After Effects without having to go to Cinema to render frames out. So this sounds perfect, and it certainly isn't perfect. It's great, but the thing that people forget is that if you have to render something in Cinema 4D for, I don't know, let's say a minute a frame, which is fast, it will render a minute a frame in After Effects too. But if you're working in After Effects, you're used to seeing things very, very quickly. You don't want to wait 25 minutes for a 1-second preview, or even you don't want to wait 15 minutes for that. You want to see it quickly. So you really have to balance it when you use Cinewear. So of course you can use it to output full renders. If you optimize the renders that you have something within seconds of a frame as a render time, then it works perfectly fine. Rendering in After Effects, like typography or something very simple, something extruded, that's perfect. But for something that renders more, and I think this was about 2 hours or something for this whole sequence, you can still use Cinewear. Why? Because you can still import the C4D file and you can pull out the 3D data. So you can say, I want to have the same camera, I want to say, I want to have the lights and the null object, so you can specify all that without having to go in here in the save dialog and do this, basically. Okay, so this is like the old way. Of course, it still applies, you can still do that. But it's much, much easier to load up the C4D file and pull out the data. And for my workflow, I always tend to forget this one object channel. Like, oh gosh, this object doesn't have an alpha, so I have to go back and re-render it. Now with Cinewear, you can just load the C4D file in and say, I want to have this alpha channel for this specific object, and then you're good to go. So that's very handy. So I have a couple of object passes, and this one just one. Obviously refraction, all these things I wanted to change afterwards, and also the motion vector. I honestly never really render motion blur and depth of field in Cinema 4D. Not because it renders long, but simply because I want to be able to tweak the look after I've rendered it. I want to define how much blur I want. I want to define how much motion blur I want to really be able to change things to the last minute. Why? Because you're working for a client. And we all know clients, they always come back to you Friday afternoon. You're about to finish, and they say, like, well, can you just not change this quickly? No, I can't. Well, you don't say that. You say, yes, I can. So you kind of have to pull it off. So let me fire this up in After Effects quickly to show you a few of the things here. that you can do to make this stand out really. So this is like the pure render. This is all just put together with different blending modes. And normally, if you import the file as from Cinema 4D, it will give you the automatically correct blending mode, but you can change them, of course, to have a desired effect as you want to go ahead. So what can you do? Well, I started out having the logo effects diffuse, and I wanted to make it shiny and like sparkly. And one of the filters that I use really, really often are the sapphire filters. So, for example, what's it called? Glint, I think. I use a lot of glint for this one in a subtle way. Well, if you look at it, this might look a little bit cheesy, I would say, just by the default setting. So you want to be really careful. And the good thing is, with these effects, they have a million things you can change and tweak and set up. Some of them I don't even understand, but that's fine because you can also work visually. You can make the glint bigger and smaller. And depending on how you work with it, you can show, of course, the background to see how it actually looks like. I think for this project, I chose to have a bit more vertical glint for this one. So you can really accentuate it quite well, and the visual feedback is really, really fast, so you can work quite fast with it, and if you render it. And the good thing is with the new release of the After Effects, I was hating it, the new engine, because you don't have the traditional RAM preview anymore. So I was like, hey, what the hell? I want to have my RAM preview. But after a while, I understood what that rework of that engine made is that you can, once a frame is cached, you can change things much easier, and it will still play back. So for example, I'll let it render here so we can quickly go over some of the things here. So once a frame is cached, it will, well, marketing-wise, it's been doing this for the last 5 years, I think. So the smart caching was supposed to work perfectly fine. Sometimes it didn't. But for me, if you go back and you can just change a few things, it will still play back almost in real time. So of course, it has to cache a few things, but it doesn't have to cache everything. And you can make things look differently. And if you crank it up a lot, then it, like make it, I don't know, let's make it brighter. Play with the threshold. See that? But even if I play it back now, the rendering is much faster because it's cached all the other stuff. So the feedback is much, much nicer. So what else did I use? I have a few comps here that I've preset for you, so I don't have to build it from scratch. Well, obviously, you can see that there's also the background, and you might be wondering, how did I get that background? Well, due to time constraints, I didn't shoot the background myself because I thought, yeah, you go out at night with your DSLR and you just film a couple of lights and defocus it and use that effect. I ended up using something from stock. It's called mbokeh. I don't know if you know that. Motion VFX. They have a bunch of fantastic footage things like dust being blown up in the air, and they have these bokeh things. And actually, let me just show you a little tip. I don't know if you knew that, but see that? That's a little plugin. It's called Previewer. It's from a company called Mr. Horse. Don't laugh at me. They present their stuff with a horse mask on, so I thought, okay, this stuff cannot be serious. And then I tried the plugin, and I thought, oh my God, this is such a time saver because you can just basically click any footage item, it will play it back for you. And I think this is huge in After Effects because you don't have to double-click the footage item, render it to play it back. And this works for like Illustrator files, PSDs, WAV files, QuickTimes. So this is really nice. So you can actually see how the footage elements look like. So I always have it docked here, and I can resize it as I need it. So it's called Previewer. So again, yeah, I used these. I layered these up into different background elements. So it's not just one. I didn't want to take it off the shelf and like, okay, it's mbokeh version 4 or whatever. So I was using a lot of masks to actually come up with a final design to have this look. So if you look at a single bokeh curve, it will look totally different. And I use an adjustment mat just to tint it bluish. So that's how that has been done. going back to this one and the background, I wanted to have some distortion in the background as well. So this looks nice. The typography is being distorted and everything, but I want to have the distortion also for the background. So I went back and created a distort map. And for the distort map to work, I always use like the proper render. I use a fast blur with a curves adjustment on it. Put it in the background, and then I use the simple displacement effect. Displacement map on the background. And when I show that, I can specify where the displacement map layer is. So I can use the distort map, and I can crank this up to give this nice effect. You see that? I can maybe crank it up even more for the seats in the back. And if you play that, if you put that on top of it, you can see the difference behind the glass. So it gives that really nice distortion effect. And then added a few glows, I think, to this layer. Let me see that. And of course, the real smart motion blur vectors. And because I mentioned before, I never render motion blur directly in Cinema 4D. So I always use post motion blur, as you call it, and it's a plugin called Real Smart Motion Blur. And the way you use it is, for those of you who doesn't know how to use motion blur in the post-production? Everyone knows it? Really? Okay, then I can just spare that. So basically, you set it up, and you specify the motion path, which looks like this, these funny colors. And the important thing to know is, in After Effects, I don't know how many of you know that, if you go to your footage, and you go to motion, you go to interpret footage, and one of the most important things is to say preserve RGB for this motion channel. Don't ask me why I think it's the way it's interpreting this red and green values. If it's different, then the motion blur might look different. So always click on Preserve RGB if you interpret this motion path coming out of Cinema 4D, for example. And then you set that up, and you have perfect motion blur. So what else can you do to make this look a bit more organic? So I have a few standard procedures that I do. I almost vignette my shots, and I use two techniques. I either use just a simple dark solid, and I just mask it out, as in here, for example. So you can just basically play and direct the attention of the viewer to the middle. Another option is that I really like. I didn't use it for this particular project because I wanted to have it more organic and not so round, is going to the Sapphire Vignette effect. If you haven't used that one, it's really, really nice because it gives you basically so many things that you manually have to do with the mask and the feathering as a plugin, and again, with a very fast and visual feedback on how you can adjust these things, and you can rotate it and make it look really, really nice, and you can set the blend mode. So these are the two techniques that I use to create a vignette, and almost all my motion graphics pieces have a vignette of some sort. Then obviously, you had the optical flares. So some of the optical flares, I think, are happening in the middle, just as a little glint. Let me see where it is. Yeah, here. That's the red, actually. Some of the optical flares are happening right here, just as a sparkle. And again, I try to use them as subtle as I can, so not too big. I always use the add blend mode, because I think it just blends in nicer. I always set my project panel to 16-bit, in case someone doesn't know that or doesn't use that. That helps a lot. And one of the things that I really, really like is chromatic aberration. So with CG renderers, we always tend to make things look perfect. Everything is too sharp. Everything is pristine. Although we wanted to have pristine glass, high gloss quality, I still want to give this organic look to it. And chromatic aberrations are basically imperfections that are in the lens, and they cause those fringes on edges, so you have this little shift of red and blue. And again, a lot of people ask me, so what do you use for chromatic aberrations? Well, the answer is you can build it manually, which is very complicated. Well, not complicated, but time-consuming. But the easiest way is to use warp chroma, and I'm just going to reset that quickly for you. I'm just going to add it fresh so you can see how it looks. So warp chroma. So if I put that down, you will see immediately what happens. This looks not really cool. So obviously you can crank up the steps and you can make it really smooth, but it still doesn't look like a proper chromatic aberration. Well, the secret lies here in warp from Z distance. If you pull that back, so you can see it, you can actually also visually pull that back, you will see what happens. And I think it's quite nice what's happening at the edges. So basically it will blur things, so obviously this is a way too strong value, but you can also tweak it a little bit, so you can add those lens imperfections like that. And I think this really helps to blur things out. Sometimes I use a fast blur for a render just to make it a little bit imperfect, but adding a warp chroma or a chromatic aberration effect will also blur the effect for you. And if I toggle this on and off, you can see that it towards the edges, it's much more blurred than to the inside, and you can twist the effect to actually create completely abstract things. So that's also nice to play with and try things out. But that's more or less the final part, and then of course I slap some grain on it. Just some subtle values. The values that I use, in case you're interested, I always set the color frequency up to the resolution that I have, so 1920, and I play with the color amplitude of maybe 003 or something. So just to make it just really nice, just barely noticeable, so there's some grain, you don't have any banding artifacts. Hope you can make it out on the screen. Can you see that, the grain? Okay. So yeah, this is basically my approach to making things sexy, as the client says. You know, making glossy, adding glows, a little bit of glint just to pull off the effect, a little bit of optical flares. And then the good thing is with the multipass render, if I go into this one here and I can highlight that just to isolate it, so you can see, for example, since I have the refraction pass, you can only see like proper highlights, and playing with glint and the threshold here, if I go to the threshold, you can really specify on how much and how many things should actually reflect. So this should look like if this thing is spinning and there's some strong light coming, only certain parts that are facing the camera are refracting strongly, so you can work with that quite easily. So yeah, that's that, and I'd like to go to the next project. Exquisite Corpse. I will not show you this in the software itself. I just use this more as an inspiration thing. This was a fun project, as you've seen. I don't want to make sound like this is like a marketing thing for GenArts, but the truth is, I've been using their plugins for 15 years, and they kind of know me, and they said, well, you know, we like your work. Would you like to do a piece for us for an NAB, what we can run in our booth? And I said, hell yes, of course. What's the briefing? Well, we don't have one. And I said, that's great. Oh no, I have to sit down and think what I want to do, and it's always this love-hate thing, like, okay, you have creative freedom, but you want to satisfy the client, and you want to satisfy your creative outlet and needs, and everyone should be happy. And I'm like, oh man, I was in the middle of a project. And the challenge was for this one that it was a short time frame. I think it was 4 weeks before NAB, they asked me. And I knew I could not do it alone. They want to have 1 minute. So I thought, okay, what can we do? I asked around in our shared studio who can and who wants to collaborate with me on this one, and thankfully 4 guys wanted to. The problem was that all those 4 guys were booked into different projects at different times, so there was not a single week of overlap where we could work together on this thing. So we thought, okay, what can we do? And then we brainstormed a little bit for maybe an hour or something, and then we came up with this idea of Exquisite Corpse, and that takes me back to the question at the beginning. So what is an Exquisite Corpse? It is something that you might have done in school, or even do today. There's Photoshop Ping Pong, for example. That's an example of Exquisite Corpse. The idea is that someone starts something, hands over a little bit of it to someone else, then this person continues this work, hands it off to someone else, and so on. And so you get this nice collaborative piece of art that exists, and I think it's really experimental. And that's a good example. I truly found this on Wikipedia, and I hope no one gets offended. But this is a good example of an exquisite corpse, like completely absurd, Y hands and the chest and everything and whatever. But this is a good example of exquisite corpse. So for us, the idea was, okay, let's use the Sapphire logo, which is an A, and take this as a start and end point for each one of us. We are 4 artists, and each one of us animates 15 seconds. And again, completely freedom, what we can do. The only task was that we have to use the Sapphire effects somehow, like explore different ways of using it. And I said, yeah, cool. So that's actually a project where I didn't use Cinema 4D at all personally, because I was just doing so many 3D animated things at that time. And I thought, yeah, why not just go back to 2D animation? The 3 other guys, however, just went crazy trying out new techniques, and it was a good playground because Akira wanted to try something, I think, with some particles, and Kais wanted to do some dynamics, and Saad wanted to do some modeling, and X particles, I think. So basically, it was just a ground for us to play and learn and generate something that hopefully excited them. So yeah, and obviously I had to loop, so you go back and you can loop it and rerun it. So it was perfect, could run on the booth. The sound design, the music was done by Andy Thoma. And again, I can only speak a little bit about the process that was here for my part, because this was the second part. I wanted to animate After Effects visuals, like keyframes and icons that you know from After Effects, like the quality icon, the adjustment layer icon, the cogwheel, the search wheel, the stopwatch, the 3D and stuff like that, and I used just 2D to come up with that, and it was just big fun. And you want to see a little making of? Just a little 3-minute clip. So you can see the guys who did it, and you can see some of the process. So. So yeah, that was that. Big fun. Off to the next one, fun with bubbles. Last year, I was approached by Liga 01 Computer Film in Munich. It's a studio. They do fantastic work, a lot of CG work, some of motion graphic work, and I was super happy that they asked me to come up to create some of the MediaMarkt new campaign logo animations for their new campaign, which was Hauptsache ihr habt Spaß. I don't know if who's speaking German here. Okay, great. So I also run the ad at the end, which is I think quite funny. So they asked me to come up with the animation, and I wasn't working locally, so I could do it in my own studio, which was great. The agency was Zum Roten Hirschen, and obviously the client was MediaMarkt. And this project as well had a few challenges that I needed to tackle, and one of the main challenges was that the animation had to look almost exactly like the print ad. Well, this is obviously something that's very common, but given the way that it looks, it was not so easy to come up with, because this is the shapes that they have. This is like the briefing we got, basically a couple of frames as a storyboard, so they should animate on, they should pop on, they should be balloonish, squishy, fun, but not too much fun, because it's still serious, but fun. Yeah, and then of course the obvious stuff comes that you see in the commercials. So what was the challenge? Well, the challenge was that you see, if you go back a few frames, you will see those reflections, and everything is drawn in Illustrator. So obviously this is like someone envisioned it. This is the way, and there's no way you can come up with the same exact reflections, at least not in that given time frame, to match them perfectly as the illustration is. But obviously, doing this as a 2D animation wouldn't really work because of all the iterations that you had to go through. In the beginning, I heard there's going to be a lot of back and forth. Okay, it has to be bouncy, not too bouncy. It has to be slower, faster. And to do this frame by frame, animated mask or something in After Effects would just be a nightmare. So for me, the solution was to recreate the bubbles in 3D and using Cinema 4D for that. And again, I tried to work with my skill set of Cinema 4D to make this. I knew this was the only way to come up with it, and this is like a before and after, and almost like 99% matches the general shape. So how did I set it up? Let me just quickly show this, and what I've used for this. Let me just go in and open this up. So what I did first is I did a background element, and then I loaded in the texture so I can kind of map out the general shape. And there was a lot of back and forth, and I knew, okay, how can you model this shape to be good and animatable? So the solution was to use the spline wrap. So the general shape was a capsule. So I have this capsule here, and let me just show you this one here. So this is a fairly big capsule. And then I have a spline, and I made the spline roughly the shape of the first bubble. I'm just going to focus on the left one, so you can see this is the shape here. If I hide that, so you can see a bit better. And then what I had to do is I have to use the spline wrap tool, and drag this in. And then I have to define the spline. And for this, I define the spline here. Let me show it again. So this is what happens, and well, this is completely not what I expected. And then I thought, okay, what can you do? Well, I always like to trill things out and play with it, and then I found this size, spline size and size, which you can then adjust to fit. So you can basically then play with this one, and this is like a almost hidden feature, like it's toggled in and you cannot really see it. But you can play with these effects to create this completely organic, abstract shapes. And the good thing is, since it's the spline wrap effector, you can use the from and the offsets to actually animate it. So basically, you can go in and say, okay, I want to have it finished in maybe 10 frames. So you set a keyframe there. You go in and you say, okay, it starts from there. So this is the source. And if you play it back, you have this quick animation. And this was the way I wanted to do it, but since they wanted to have it bouncy and kind of organic, how can you get this bouncy? Of course, you can animate it keyframe-wise, but the best way to do that was to basically use the jiggle deformer. So I used the jiggle deformer, just add it on top, and if you play that back now, you can see that it gives this nice little effect, and you can of course get rid of all those fancy things if you put a smoother on it. But then again, using the jiggle deformer with the strengths and the stiffness, well, if you just go back and play with different stiffness, you will see that it looks totally different. And I think I had about 40 iterations of this. So in total, I think almost every setting was tried out and sent to the client, and it almost felt like, okay, wow, when are we going to have this finally done? And I'm quickly going to show you the setup for how the final jiggle deformer looked like. And you can see that it almost perfectly matches it. And if I toggle down the actual spline here, there was a lot of back and forth. So even if I just change this little thing here, you can see that it totally changes the edge, and it doesn't really match anymore. So it was a lot of back and forth until you find the perfect match. And then you put a smoother on it, and then everything gets smoothed out. So I had the basic shape laid out first. So that was fun. And then of course it came, okay, bouncy but not too much. Again, organic and fun, of course. So the jiggle deformer helped a lot with those settings, so you could quickly spit out different iterations. And the reference that I was sent was this one here. And this was the only reference that we had, so it was kind of this squashy little cartoon, again, like a cell shader on it. And then, so these are a couple of versions that we did, and of course another version, but I said, yeah, so this whole thing has to be in 3D, and then this was abandoned again because it was a bit difficult with the type, and then obviously the reflections are not matching. So this was too slow. So then I went back to shading. So how can I get those reflections more or less match what we have here? So I abandoned the idea that the reflection is going to be exactly the same, like this drawn line, because again, it was almost impossible to draw that. So the idea was born to actually go with this way here. Let me just play that back quickly. This is a little bit slower here now because I have a really, really high mesh setup here. And as you can see, if you scrub through, this whole animation is basically the texture is mapped on it on a flat mapping. So the problem is the texture is not following the actual shape. So wow, that was difficult. So how can you actually match it, because you don't have a proper UV because it's constantly evolving? So the solution was to actually get rid of the reflections, map the text specifically as flat mapping, and bake out a texture. So I baked out a texture, and let me show you that quickly. So I baked out a texture, and it looks something like this. If you, so it's, like this UV matted thing, and then let me just drag this onto this one. And then it matches quite perfectly. So if you animate it, you will see that the text is actually coming out properly. So you shouldn't really change the angle of this, because it's really just mapped onto this surface. But it works perfectly fine. And then some of the feedback was that no, the text should not be distorted. So at the end, the text is put on as a 2D layer in After Effects and hand animated, just to give this impression, a little bit of offset, so it doesn't look so perfect. But still, it doesn't solve the issue of the reflections. So what can I do with the reflections? Well, I went back and looked at different cell shading options. And if I render that really quickly, it rendered very fast. I think it's less than a second. I used the cell shader setup. And the way this is set up is just basically one diffuse color and one specular color. So depending on how big the specular color is, it will react properly to the lights. And then obviously there was a lot of back and forth with the lights. Let me just make it a little bit smaller. So this was almost the exact same position. And if I give you an interactive render region, you can see the lights. So each bubble had its own light setup. And for example, for the left bubble, all the other bubbles were excluded. So if you go to project, you can say exclude The left light is excluding the right and the middle bubble. So it's only affecting this, this one here. And if you, let's say I want to move the light, you can see how drastic the changes are. So if I move it down, or in X, it will completely destroy the look. So it was a lot of back and forth nudging, just like in the GIF at the beginning, a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right, until you get it just right and almost match the final look. So that was a bit challenging. But at the end, it kind of worked out. And again, there's a lot of keyframe animation, and some of you might be wondering, how did I do this on the lower end? This was also very challenging. Well, this at the end is just simple keyframe animation. I think I had about 10 layers or something, masks basically coming out of the swirl, because they wanted to be very accurate. The logo cannot be changed, so it cannot be an overlap or something. It was pretty crazy. So this is the After Effects comp, how it looks like, and you wouldn't expect it, but this was a lot of keyframes back and forth for the text and also for the mask, just to come up with the final version. It looks something like this. Yeah, so about 2 seconds of animation worth, I think, 3 weeks of work. I was super proud of this project, and by the time it came in TV, I was like, damn, I cannot even see it anymore. It was kind of funny, but it was good to see the final commercials at the end, because obviously it was part of a bigger marketing thing, and a couple of commercials directed by Sven Bollinger, produced by Tony Petersen Film, and post-production was by Liga 01. And I only did that little part at the end, but I still will run the commercials for you. So for those who are not able to understand German, please excuse me. They're not available in English, but I'll run them anyway, so maybe you can make out some of the fun anyway.
Der ist es, oder?
Der ist es.
Sollen wir denn auch liefern und aufbauen?
Da fragt die mich, ob die den liefern soll. Ich so, sehe ich etwa aus, als ob ich Hilfe brauche? So ein Teil trage ich doch auf dem kleinen Finger nach Hause. Ja. Und ruckzuck eingebaut, das Ding. Da wurdet ihr aber mucksmäuschenstill. Ja. Ich wäre so gern wie du. Ich weiß. Ja, liefern wäre gut.
Vielleicht, wenn außer Ihnen niemand zu Hause ist?
Gute Idee.
Hauptsache, ihr habt Spaß.
Mediamarkt.
That was the first one, and the second one is this one here.
Das kann übrigens in jede Richtung bügeln.
Das soll ein Geschenk werden. Für meine Frau.
Verstehe. Ich weiß ganz genau, was Sie wollen. Aber versuchen Sie es besser damit. Hauptsache, ihr habt Spaß.
Mediamarkt.
So yeah, that was it. It certainly was fun. Still proud of it, although it was a lot of work. And yeah, hope you enjoyed this little talk. I think we have a couple of minutes, 5 minutes maybe, for some questions. If you have any, 3 minutes, yeah. Any questions from anyone? Anything?
In your first project,
Yeah.
I've seen that the render passes in After Effects, you have them as QuickTimes, as mobs. Do
Yes.
you render out render passes as QuickTimes? Or?
Very, very good question. The question was, the render passes were as QuickTimes and not sequence like TIFF or PNG or EXR. Yes, that was QuickTime in that case. Usually I do render out sequences, file sequence, simply because if the computer crashes, you can pick it up, all the obvious reasons. For this particular project, I indeed rendered QuickTimes because the turnaround time was so fast. I only had like 3 days, and I found the feedback in After Effects when working with QuickTimes a lot faster than with the TIFF sequence. I thought I might go back and re-render it as a TIFF sequence when the quality is not good enough. And in fact, I did have some banding as well because it was a gray and black and white render more or less. But once I composited everything together in After Effects, there was nothing visible and it looked perfectly fine. So I just left it as a QuickTime because performance was so much better. And as you could see today, it's still, even on a laptop, it just blows. So that really helped for the project. Anything else? Yes, on the right.
In your first example, how did you do it with the letters? Did you put the letters as a texture on the glass pieces, or because they seem to reflect in the glass?
Good question. The question was, how did I use the how did I put the letters on? Let me just find the project quickly for you. Yes, this one. The other one didn't have the texture. Well, there's two things. For example, there's one layer in the background. It's this one. It has the letter or the logo as a texture. So it's basically with an alpha channel. And the next one is, I think, is somewhere in the cloner as well. They also had the letters in there as well. So I had two layers with the letters. But since I had the alpha channel, I could mask out the letters and put them back on in After Effects. So I used so this one doesn't have the letters that you can see through. So I used the alpha, obviously. But you can only see the letters that are within the shapes. And later on in After Effects, as soon as the logo is revealed, I matched the movement because I used the same camera and overlaid the 2D logo to have the perfect 2D version because they didn't want to have any like beveled version or something, or extruded version, so that was kind of aligning it. Does this kind of answer your question? Yes. Okay, cool. And I think to the left there was, yes?
Do you have any advice for a student looking to get themselves out there as a freelancer?
If I have advice for a freelancer to get out there, actually that was a topic of a whole talk at Animago last year, filling 1 hour. The biggest advice is it might sound cliche and really like cheesy, but if you really love what you do and can commit to long work hours and a lot of work, then obviously you will end up having a good job, either as a freelancer or within a studio. I think this is the only way to keep up and stay sane. If you wouldn't love what you like, who in the world would stare at a screen for 12 hours? But the other thing is maybe more practical is to be very active on social. Let the world know what you can do. I might not be the best at what I'm doing, I know that, but I'm trying to get out there and to show like, hey, here I am. I'm a fun guy to work with, hopefully. Some of my work is good. Maybe you want to hire me to work for you. So I think that's the thing. And I know a lot of artists that are great, that are way better than I am, but they're like hiding behind their computer and never going out, never shouting out their work and saying like, hey, this is what I've done. I'm proud of it. So I think this is something that helps me a lot to really go out, give speaking gigs, talk to people like you, and show my work, either you like it or not, but at least be brave and stand up for yourself and show your stuff. And then eventually, if it's good, someone is going to pick it up and like it and give you money for it. I think that wraps it up quite nicely. I think the next talk is about to start. So thanks again for coming, and have a nice FMX. Thank you.